Remind me to turn this thing off because I have left it on. The last one I actually did. I left it on. Or one of the last ones.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and so then I went into the next class. So, yeah, we're not going to do that again. All right, so good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Please, outside, please. Thank you. Reminder, next time you guys come in here on Thursday, 20-point quiz. Ooh, yeah. 20-point quiz. Ready for it? Okay. Multiple choice matching, I believe, is the format for that. Or, excuse me, matching and true false. So yeah, Thursday the 22nd for you guys. For this unit, I've got two of those chapter quizzes. Chapter 40, which is also a 20-point one. So come in ready for that. Okay. And I believe everyone in here I have had meetings with as far as their IA. So you guys have got marching orders or some particular thing that you need to do on that, which is good. Some of the folks at home, I do need to make arrangements with them, set up meetings. This week is pretty full because I'm going through with my 11th graders and coming up with really, really interesting topic questions and so forth for them. I mean, they're all over the place, all over, and which makes it very, very interesting. Okay? For you guys, next week on Monday and Wednesday when I see you guys, I'll probably be doing something very video-oriented in class, so watch for that. Because the green folks, they're not going to be here on Tuesday and Thursday actually attending class. You guys, I believe, are all going to be here doing the SAT on Tuesday, is that right? Okay. And did you get anything from Mr. Pettit? Because I think basically it's like after your exam is done at, I don't know, 11:30 or so, get the heck out. It is weird because on Thursday we're giving the PSAT, and so we got all the 10th graders, and then some 11th and 9th graders are doing it as well. And if they're still in the building after the exam is over, they go to the rest of their classes. So I've been encouraging my students to make arrangements with your parents to come and pick you up, because otherwise you'll be coming in here during the class time. And I'm really concerned about one of the 10th grade groups, because if I combine the blue and the green for that particular period, I don't have enough depth. Because it's a 10th grade group. I mean, a lot of the people they'll still be in the building. Yeah.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday.
Yeah, so you got your regular blue day, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and then you come Tuesday just for the SAT part. Yeah. So that actually, yeah, I mean, for my class, just know this: bring food, be comfortable. I will have probably it's going to be like one of them. I was looking at this. One of them will probably be one of the ones I'm going to be showing you anyway. You would have been watching at home with the CNN Cold War ones. And then there's one actually I'm going to have you see that's not on there. It's the one that looks at kind of like the 1960s in the United States and a lot of the turmoil and so forth going on there with the civil rights movement and the anti-war movement, and it's called Make Love Not War. Anyway, so it's the 1960s in America, and that was one of, honestly, I think I show you pretty much all of the CNN Cold War videos, except for there's one on China that most of the time I don't, because I've actually got two other really good videos that I show on the craziness that goes on in China during the Cultural Revolution and some of the other kinds of things that are going on there. That's very eye-opening. Oh my gosh, that's very, very good documentary. That's part of this unit. So, anyway, so next week, yeah, I think Ellie, you got it figured out. You're here more than any other students.
What class are we in?
You got an email. It didn't say?
We'll probably just meeting either a first period or
I
half day.
I saw it, because I saw Mr. Pettit sent it out to at least all the teachers. I want to say, don't quote me on this, but I think it might be in one of the larger science rooms where they can spread people out, and just have everybody. I think you're all going to be in one room, 2 rooms maximum.
So just seniors, right?
Yeah, it's just seniors. It's the the one paid for by the government, the state of Idaho, that you weren't able to do last spring. So, some of you guys, raise your hand if you've already taken an SAT or an ACT. Just because, yeah, you know, like you just wanted to make sure to do that. In fact, didn't you do that? You do that like...
I had myself.
Yeah, yeah. And weren't you doing it like during break or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I remember that conversation. I was there. You were there too. And you were just getting ready to take the ACT or the SAT? SAT. So, yeah, they're all over the place. Okay. And some of you guys may have done those multiple times. Okay? So, any questions? All right. Very good. Let us continue with math. Don't be angry. Be happy. It's about math. It's about mutual assured destruction. Okay? Right? Try and think, what is the more particular definition of mutual assured destruction? How many people could be killed in a country that fires off a first strike at another country? Let's say we're talking about the United States and the Soviet Union. The country responding to that first strike could still kill how many people in the other country? Official definition. Everybody get that? I think I gave that to you guys, yeah? 20 to 50%. So you're thinking about the right ballpark. So the idea here is there's no advantage. Make sure you have that clearly in your notes. There is no advantage in doing a first strike against your opponent. Because as we go through the Cold War, in different stages we'll be looking at different technologies and so forth. There's still an opportunity for that country to fire back a retaliation strike against you and kill a vast number of your people. You understand that? So, I'm not sure if we've gotten to some of the examples of how that actually is accomplished. Raise your hand if you can tell me, what can a country do to make sure that they still have enough weapons to fire back, even if they've been hit with the first strike? What are some of the things? You may not have talked about this. Yeah? So, eventually we will have submarine-launched missiles. And that, once we do that, I mean, it's going to be really hard to find where all the other countries, all the other subs are for your opponent. I mean, literally, you're going to be like having subs following subs, trying to detect them, and subs are going to be like trying to be real quiet and hide into various different places. I mean, it's like, what happens if, you know, one sub, you can't keep track of one sub from your enemy? I mean, like, what's one sub going to do? Exactly, wipe out the entire country. Because you're going to be able to have enough missiles on that sub. And we're going to talk about something today called MIRV, M-I-R-V. You want to get to the definition of MIRV right now? Okay, this actually is going to be, we're going to start developing that in the late 60s, and we'll have it fully developed. The United States will by the 70s and into the 80s, and the Soviets will do the same thing. MIRV, the acronym stands for, ready? Multiple independently targeted re-entry vehicles. What a weird name. Multiple independently targeted re-entry vehicles. You're not going to hear me use that definition. I'm just going to call it MIRV. If something is MIRV capable. I'll give you an example. So let's say you launch a missile. It goes up. And then it sprouts 5 or 10, or I want to say maybe even as many as 20 different missiles or MIRVs or bombs, whatever you want to call it. And each of them can target a separate target. That's why it's called independently targeted re-entry vehicles. Does that make sense? So it's kind of like, I don't know, maybe an analogy would be, have you ever played badminton with somebody and they were being kind of joking around? And they have like 5 badmintons, and then they hit it, and all of a sudden, instead of trying to respond to one birdie, you're looking at 5 birdies coming in your direction. Does that make sense? Okay, I'm getting some nods and so forth. It's kind of like that. It's like a shotgun approach. And the thing about it is, then if you had a submarine that had like 20 missiles, and each of them had MIRV capability of like 10 to 20 MIRVs each, that's very scary. That's what I was telling you. one submarine.
Nothing from the Indian now.
Oh, tell me about it. And Hollywood producers have had a lot of interesting like plot lines when they're like, what happens if the sub-commander goes rogue?
Oh, God.
So if the sub-commander's like, I mean, imagine this. It makes for great movies, it's really scary nightmares. Let's say you're the United States sub-commander, and all of a sudden, communications go blank. For all you know, the United States has just been hit by a first strike. And you're not getting any response. You're not getting any communication from, you know, Washington, D.C. or any of the Naval Command Centers. And your orders, your standoff orders are to do what if you hear no response? Fire. Oh my gosh, that's a lot of responsibility, isn't it? And in fact, they even have that. I mean, and we're just talking about one missile silo area. You get two guys there responsible for firing off the missile silo, the missile from the silo, and if there's already been a first strike, I mean, what are they going to do? If they hear that there's incoming, I mean, how much time? How much time do you get if you get the detection that the Soviets have launched, or vice versa, the United States has launched? How much time do you have? Like 10 minutes or so-ish? I mean, are you going to stick around in your missile silo and fire back, or are you going to be hitting that door? I mean, these are very important questions. Oh, and here's one. If you like Matthew Broderick movies, he was in a movie called War Games. You guys ever seen that? Where the United States was like, it was theorized. The United States was like, let's just computerize the whole thing. So that instead of having the responsibility of having humans involved, we'll have the computer detect the incoming missiles and then rapidly fire off our arsenal at the enemy. Do you trust computers to do that? I mean, the theme of the movie was, no, you shouldn't. I mean, it was like, whoa. So, this is pretty scary stuff here. And it's in very important stuff. Again, the thing you need to write down is there's actually a comfort in knowing that your enemy can destroy you even if you strike first and vice versa. They actually refer to it as this. It's just like nuclear war is unthinkable. And we've actually seen that. When Pakistan and India, when they both developed nuclear weapons, that they can launch at each other, how many wars have they fought since? 0. Why? Yeah, because they're both kind of like, let's be careful not to enter into a war. I mean, there are people out there that would love to get nuclear weapons and use them against the United States, but they're generally not countries. It would be like rogue terrorist groups that would be like, that just blow up, whatever. Because, they're willing to sort of sacrifice themselves to cause a lot of harm to the United States. But would countries do that? Because what would be the response, let's say, if North Korea attacked the United States? What would happen to North Korea? Oh, it would be gone. The whole thing would be gone. Yeah, so I mean, if you're a government of a country, there's a real emphasis to just like not do anything stupid. That's the whole beauty behind MAV. If you're mutually assured to be destroyed, then you just really don't want to get into a fight. Okay? Does that make sense? All right, now, another key thing that we're looking at all these different things about nuclear weapons is, and this is a difficult part, because there's going to be people, and we'll see this later on in the Cold War, where people will say, can we just get rid of all nuclear weapons? Raise your hand if you just want to get rid of all nuclear weapons. Because if you get rid of all nuclear weapons and you no longer have nuclear weapons, what is your defense against other countries using nuclear weapons against you? So, here we go. We're going to be, which one do you want to be, U.S. or the Soviet Union? Soviet. And I'm the U.S. And we just shook on we're getting rid of all nuclear weapons. Oh my gosh, wow, we just trusted each other to get rid of all nuclear weapons. How do you, write that down, how do you verify if both sides agree to get rid of nuclear weapons? Or even, which we'll see later on, to limit the number of nuclear weapons. How do you verify that? Do I just take you on your word? Write this down. What is it going to take for a country that goes into an agreement with another country about limiting or getting rid of nuclear weapons, what is it going to take to verify that? Oh, it's going to be better than 5. Because if we're really going to have that agreement, you need to let me bring my people in to look around. And I need to let you bring your people in to look around, to verify. Write that down. We're going to see that later on. You're going to have President Reagan, use this. He actually will learn the Russian phrase for trust but verify. That was one of the reasons Donald Trump did not like the agreement that Barack Obama entered into with Iran. Iran agreed to not develop nuclear weapons and so forth. And Barack Obama's like, I feel comfortable that we have the things in place to verify that the Iranians are abiding by their word. Trump's like, I don't think so. And Trump wasn't the only one that was saying that. I don't think so. I think they're hiding stuff. So, that's going to be the really, really tricky part. I don't know. This is like a current issue. If you ask Iran today, are they hiding stuff? They'll be like, no. Other people are like, no, I think they are hiding stuff. It's tricky. It's a very important thing. Because if you are hiding stuff, and I have proven I got rid of all my nuclear weapons, now what do you have? Yeah, you got a gun. You can use that leverage. If you want to. If you dare, I don't know. So this is the problem. Now, actually write this down. Because if you have nuclear weapons, how do you know if they're still good? Let's say the United States, 30 years ago, built 100 nuclear weapons. How do I know if they're still good? You got a car sitting in the driveway over the winter time. How do you know it's going to start in the spring? You got to give it a shot. Well, how do you know? How do you know if your 100 nuclear weapons are still going to work? Test all of them? No, you test some of them. So you still need to test. Write that down. You still need to test. Countries will still test their weapons. What were the terms? I think we got to this last time. What were the terms of the 1963 Limited Test Ban Treaty? That was actually a smart treaty for the United States and the Soviet Union to enter into. Right? Raise your hand if you can remember what were the terms of that treaty. Soviets and the United States said, okay, we're not going to do this anymore. Above ground. Atmospheric tests. Yeah. Atmospheric tests are the kind that lead to mushroom clouds. And mushrooms are good on pizza, but they're not good when you're talking about having nuclear fallout or landing in fields of grass for Idaho cows, dairy cows to eat, and then pass that along to children in the form of milk or beef. So, we don't do those above ground tests anymore. Does that make sense? Just the underground ones. Just the underground ones. Okay? But as we go through the 60s, we've got hundreds and hundreds of nuclear weapons on both sides. Submarines are becoming very, very important. Here is a name of a missile launched from a submarine from the United States. It's called the Polaris. Write that down. The Polaris missile, fired off from a submarine. And you know what the thing about the submarines is, as I understand it, you can even launch those from even underwater. You don't have to reveal your position necessarily by coming up to the surface. It might work out better for you. I don't know. I don't know everything about submarines and so forth. But nevertheless, our submarines and the Soviet ones remain very stealthy, very quiet, trying not to have much of a signature, so we know, so that we can be very, very sneaky about it. Can we actually have a submarine underneath a polar ice cap for many, 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 many days? Sure. I think after a while, but sure. Yeah. And it's going to be very confined. But if you go to the Navy, you go to serve in the nuclear Navy part, yeah. Well, in fact, it's very interesting because that's the one part of the Navy, even still today, that hasn't allowed women. Yeah, because you're so in close quarters, they've never really said, okay, well, we can mix it up. They mix it up on ships. Ships are bigger. But in the submarines so far, they haven't done that. And some people have said, well, how about if we have submarines with an all-female crew? Because then you wouldn't have that problem. The only difficulty there is where your submarine officer is going to get the experience that they need in order to handle those like officer type responsibilities. So they're still kind of working on that, but submarines are very, very close quarters, underwater potentially for a long, long time, and certainly during the training. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
You know they get used to it.
All right, write this down. Civil defense. Civil defense. Write it down. Civil defense. We know in like World War II, like if you lived in London, you know, and things bombing start taking place, and your head's down to the the underground, the tube, for safety. What do you do for civil defense for nuclear war? Did we already show you like the duck and cover one? You got a little cartoon thing where you're like, yay, you know what the turtle says, you put your head in. Yeah, I mean, the civil defense campaigns in both countries were basically kind of falling flat at that point, okay? Probably the Russians, you can write this down, the Russians took it more seriously than others. Although some people even joke, the Russians had a very, very dark sense of humor during the time of communism and so forth. They would say, here, the Russian civil defense, here is shovel, now go dig 6 feet in ground, and there is your bunker. Make sure that the pile of dirt is right next to where you are when you get into your bunker so that the people who actually survive can put the dirt on top of you. I mean, no, seriously. There were people in the United States that built their own bunkers. You get that? Yeah, it's like you did your own grave, yeah. There were some people that were building their own backyard bunkers. And filling them with all kinds of very different supplies and so forth.
What's that YouTuber that did?
I don't know. I mean, and there's been like, I think it was like Encino Man, was that the one where like there's somebody came out of a bunker that they'd been there like since the 1960s during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and they came out of it like 25, 30 years later, and it's like, whoa, what's going on? Anyway, yeah, it was kind of not so. Let's put it this way, by the time I was like going to school outside of Washington, D.C. in the early 1970s, they didn't bother doing drills for like a nuclear attack. They still occasionally would have like the siren thing out, but mostly people just ignored it. I mean, exactly, what are you going to do? I mean, honestly, if you know about how this is, you would rather be where the strike hits, because then it would be over. If you're not where the strike hits, I mean, how long are you going to stay underground before the world is cleared of nuclear fallout and radiation? Yeah, I mean, it's like you're not. If you come out, then you're going to be like radioactivized. And they did studies of it. Even if the United States and the Soviet Union just attacked each other in the northern hemisphere, eventually the trade winds would take the nuclear fallout and radiation and cover the entire planet. So places like, southern Australia, New Zealand would get it last. But that's, yeah. I mean, so civil defense was not really very serious. One of the things they bring up in the film, and you'll be watching this, and that is using care when having nuclear weapons. So for example, you can write this down. This is in 1966. We had a B-52 crash. Right, so an airplane crashed. So what? Well, it had nuclear weapons on it. In 1966. Okay. And it was called the Alvin. And basically, this was off the coast of Spain. Some of them landed on the ground. And where somebody was like, well, if a nuclear bomb crashes, is it going to explode like a big nuclear explosion? No, because it hasn't been armed. But what you will have is a really nasty mess of radioactive material that you need to clean up. And some of those ones, there was one that fell in off the coast of Spain, and eventually a mini sub found it. But those are called broken arrows. You ever hear the expression broken arrow? It's kind of like, I lost my nuclear weapon. Can you find that? Can you find it? Hey kid, I'll give you a quarter. I'm looking for it anyway. So you have to be very careful in the transference and maneuvering of nuclear missiles and materials. I mean, bombs, for a while there, why were we still having bombs in airplanes? Because we always got to have somebody in the sky in case we ever get attacked. So we've got some bombs in some airplanes in case they need to go on a mission to drop on folks. Eventually, we moved more away from that, and we just like, okay, we got the missiles in the ground or in the submarines, and so if we need to do a strike, we'll do a strike. Oh boy, howdy. Now, here's another concept. You ready? ABM. Write this down. ABM. The Soviets were the first to develop it. The United States looked at it, but then said, no. So what is ABM? ABM is anti-ballistic missile. An anti-ballistic missile. Okay? Basically, the idea behind an ABM is to shoot down missiles heading in your direction. Can you talk about that? How feasible is that? Nowadays, it's more feasible. We actually have components of that in our military. I mean, it's very, very sophisticated to be able to target something coming in at a very high speed and be able to effectively, like, knock it out. But in the early stages, maybe you could perhaps set it up around a city. Or could you protect all different targets? Yeah.
Yeah, so with the ABM, if you, a nuclear missile launch shoot down, will it explode in the air?
Not necessarily. For the same reason that, like, if you dropped a nuclear bomb and it wasn't meant to go off, it hadn't been armed properly, it would just be a mess. It wouldn't be a big explosion, it would be a mess. It's kind of like, old conventional. They have places in Britain and other parts of Europe that still have unexploded bombs. The bomb lands and it just, like, sits there. It's really dangerous because if you're going around, with a backhoe and you're like, oops, boom, you detonate a bomb. So when they find those things, they try to remove them very carefully, or if they can, detonate them on the site, but, what happens to the stuff next to your house or something. So if you disable something that's coming in, it won't necessarily blow up like it's a nuclear explosion, you hope. It's kind of like the Avengers, right? That was armed. The one that Iron Man rerouted up to, like, through the wormhole or whatever that thing was, the entry point, and then it blew up on that ship. It was armed. I mean, I suppose he could have broke it and then it would have landed. That wouldn't have been near as exciting. But yeah, I mean, if you knock something down out of the sky, then you have the comfort of knowing that it's not going to blow up. You have a nuclear mess that you have to clean up, and that's not fun, but you don't have this full explosion. Okay? Here's the problem. Write this down. The problem with ABM, both sides were kind of looking at this and getting very nervous about it a little bit. If you really could come up with a so-called nuclear umbrella, you have an ABM system, an anti-ballistic missile system. It's like you've got an umbrella and nothing can hit you. If you were able to put that over your entire country, instead of just maybe one or two cities, what would it do to the other side? Think about that. Ellie and I, you're the Soviet, I'm the American. If you develop an ABM system, am I happy about that? Because what happens to my missiles? They're useless. Very good. If I know that your ABM system is about to go into operation tomorrow, what might I be tempted to do today? And then beforehand. Because who's going to be vulnerable tomorrow? Not you. Am I going to be vulnerable? Yeah, because I don't have that. You understand that? Actually, this is going to be in our next unit. Which country actually was in the process of developing or trying to develop a really good anti-missile type system in the 1980s? A really expensive one. It was Ronald Reagan. It's called Star Wars. That was what critics called it, but it was called the Strategic Defense Initiative. More on that later. But you can understand the problem, right? Tara, do you trust that if I put in a missile defense system, that I'll share that information with you so you can also have a missile defense system? No. So it's a difficult thing. You got this trust issue and so forth going on here. All right? Yes?
So with that, the Russians developed their ABM system and then or do they try to and then give it up?
Let me tell you what happened. Basically, both sides look at this and say, this is going to be way too expensive. In the 1960s, during the Johnson administration, both the United States and the Soviets abandoned an ABM system at that point. Because it's going to get very expensive, and they're looking and going, this isn't really going to necessarily work that effectively. Oh, and by the way, if I ever am able to develop something really effective, it's going to freak you out. And if you're freaked out, and you know you only have a few more days to use your nuclear missiles against me, that might just be, yeah, that might be really bad for all of us. Okay? So we're gonna not develop the ABM. It will still be talked about, and we'll come back to a type of strategic defense initiative like an ABM type thing in the 1980s. Okay. One of the nice things, 1967 Six-Day War. We'll talk more about that later. The Six-Day War, Arabs and Israelis, the United States and the Soviets talk to each other. We have a hotline, so that's good. That helps kind of keep things calm. Because the United States and the Soviets want to go to war with each other, even though our friends and allies are at war with each other in the Middle East? No, we don't. So we're on the phone going, okay, this does not mean that we're going to go to war. So cool, chill, all right? They bring that up in the film. I think that's worth making note of as well. We already talked about this, the development of multiple MIRVs, and eventually the Soviets will be developing their own, okay? Now, let's look at some agreements that the United States reaches with the Soviets. Hotline, United States, Soviet Union.
Okay.
Did we have a hotline during the Cuban Missile Crisis? No, we didn't. How did we communicate with them? Well, yeah, we had that part of communication. How did we actually have nice conversations and negotiations? Yeah, we had Bobby Kennedy get together with Ambassador Dobrynin, I think it was, and those guys helped to communicate the messages from the American president and then the Soviet leader Khrushchev. But now, with the development of the hotline, you could have a much more direct, easy communication between the Soviet leader and the United States leader, and that's going to be very helpful as we move forward on that. Okay, now, let's talk about what is called SALT. Ready? Write this down. SALT. Acronym. S-A-L-T. SALT. When we see these acronyms, you're like, that must stand for something. Okay? So what does SALT stand for? Oh, we've got it in our notes. All of these ones, actually, we got it in our notes. This is really good. If you look on page 3 at the top, episode 12, lovely. It's all there. Strategic Arms Limitation Talks, which ultimately lead to Strategic Arms Limitation Treaties. So we can stick with the same acronym, SALT, and they take place in the neutral country of Finland. Well, what's a good place to meet in Finland? Been there, it's a lovely city, Helsinki. Okay, it's not too far from the Soviet Union. They host meetings in 1970 and 1971. The goal of the SALT talks is to establish a limit. Now understand this, when they eventually do reach an agreement, and there is a treaty signed, I'll give you the date, May of 1972, when the treaty is reached between the United States and the Soviet Union. It's called SALT I, Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty 1. I don't know, you're going to get SALT 2? Yes, but that's later on down the line. This is a big deal. May of 1972. By that time, we've got President Nixon, and we have a Soviet president named Brezhnev. Here we go. Brezhnev. Okay? He's Soviet leader. Let me see if I can find Brezhnev here. Oh, there's Brezhnev. Right here. Brezhnev. Khrushchev. Yeah? So Brezhnev is the leader of the Soviet Union at the time, 1972. We'll talk a little bit more about how he actually came into power, but they reached that agreement. It was signed in Moscow, Nixon and Brezhnev. Okay? And basically what that did is it put a limit on the number of nuclear missiles and weapons and so forth that each side could have. Notice this. Was there still room to grow for the Soviets and the United States as far as developing more missiles? Yes. In fact, we're going to have, another 12,000 more warheads that are going to be added to the mix. I mean, the expression is, both sides had enough weapons to blow up the world 3, 4, 5 times over. I mean, there's just no shortage of weapons. Of course, one of the reasons why you had so many weapons is because some of them didn't work, or maybe they were able to knock some of your weapons out, or da-da-da-da-da-da. You always need to have some in reserve so you can launch that retaliatory strike. Which raises an interesting question. What do you think today? Should the United States still invest in nuclear weapons? We sure built a lot during the Cold War. Should we? You think so? Why do you think we still should? What other countries are we concerned about? I thought we got along with everybody really well. Russia and China? Are they still developing nuclear weapons? North Korea? Are those guys still developing nuclear weapons? Yes. Are they testing the ones that they have? Yes. Are we testing the ones that we have to see that among, one or two out of, whatever was built way back when, that they still work? What happens if we don't have enough that work? Have you ever had a president of the United States say, I think we'll just get rid of all nuclear weapons? Not recently. And that Cold War is over. So with that idea, you still want to have a weapon that's loaded, that's tested, that works. Why? Why? What, are you trying to deter some other countries from doing some bad thing? Yeah, that's basically what it is. It's the deterrence value. You have it so you deter other countries from doing something really stupid. Doesn't necessarily work as far as some rogue terrorist group, but you want to have that in place. Okay? So that was a big deal. The very first agreement between the United States and the Soviet Union on weapons. And make sure you put this in there. It allowed for inspection. That's going to be very, very important. Inspection. What kind of inspection protocol would you suppose would be good for a treaty? Would you like to have an inspection protocol that says, hey, you can show up whenever, unannounced, or we have to give you 2 or 3 weeks notice ahead of time? Why do you say whenever? Why do you say that would work better? Hide things and move things around and so. You think somebody would do that? Heck yeah. Heck yeah. So that's a very key component. Later when we get to actually use the reduction cost, then we'll have inspections to see what we've actually destroyed. And that you'll see that much more toward the end of the Cold War. Okay? Good. Excellent. Okay. Oh my gosh. Start the next part. It's Red Spring 1960. So your at-home viewing is going to be the video on NAV. And then we're going to start this next part that has to do with Red Spring of the 1960s. Let me give you kind of an overview so you don't have to get too far along on this one. This particular set of notes in the video is going to look at what is going on in Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union. I'll just give you a quick overview. In the 1960s, we're going to start out with this guy, Nikita Khrushchev. We've seen him in the Cuban Missile Crisis and so forth. He's eventually going to be replaced by this guy, Leonid Brezhnev. In fact, there's actually a pattern that goes. In the Soviet leaders, you have one that's bald, and then you get one that's hairy, and then the next one ends up being bald, and then you end up getting one that's, it's weird. It's like, that's our cartoon. It's like, oh my gosh, that's really weird that it worked out that way. And like the last one, who's the current one right now? Not Soviet Union, but Russia? Putin. Did you say he's got a lot of up top? Yeah, he's more kind of baldish as opposed to the guy before him, Yeltsin, who ends up being more hairy. So, yeah, we'll look at this one, and we'll be paying particular attention to a situation in Czechoslovakia, 1968, hey, in America, things were pretty wild. In other parts of the world, things were pretty wild. And in Czechoslovakia, they had what is called the Prague Spring, where they thought everything was going to be cool, but then the Soviets sent the tanks in and crushed it. So we're